Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Temple Stewart is a registered dietitian, certified personal trainer, and health behavior change specialist. Temple played D1 soccer at the University of Tennessee Martin, where she earned her degree in dietetics. Her internship was completed at the VA Medical Center in Bay Pines, Florida. The decision to become a registered dietitian stemmed from Temple's lifelong involvement in sports and her fascination with how proper fueling of the body affects performance. However, during her college years, she developed an unhealthy relationship with food, using food rules and diets as punishment or for comfort. This experience led her to delve into learning about food and its impact on the body, ultimately leading her to choose a career as a registered dietitian. Her interest in nutrition deepened after being diagnosed with Hashimoto's and PCOS, further emphasizing the importance of treating the body with proper nutrition. In her free time, if she has any, Temple enjoys reading and working out and loves outdoor activities such as hiking, swimming, biking, and exploring. Currently, Temple resides in Gilbert, Arizona with her husband, two children, and their two poodles. Temple Stewart, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. This is going to be a fun conversation.
It's going to be a great conversation. I was telling you off air, it's interesting to interview people like you because you've got such a wide range of topics and seemingly such a narrow band. Like when we're talking about, ketosis, ketogenesis, like we're only talking about one thing, but there's so many aspects that we could go into. So I think this will be a really fun conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
And as I said in the introduction, in your free time, you like to do things. Do you have any free time?
I do. I make free time mostly because I have young kids that I think deserve a fun mom. So I do make free time, but I really, I really love what I do and I'm really passionate about what I do. And I think there's just so many people that need help. So I don't consider my work. And so it just kind of all mushes together. But yes, I do. I love Arizona. I love getting outdoors here. This is a fantastic place to live for hiking and getting out in the sun. And so, yeah, it's great. But, I don't consider my work at the same time. So I feel very blessed and honored to live the life I live. I really do.
Isn't it amazing to bounce out of bed and just know that you've got information that can totally change the trajectory of somebody's life?
It is fun. I will say that it is fun. It's been an honor for sure.
It's amazing. Yeah, you do such great work too. I used an older version of your bio. So I got to the very end and talked about your two poodles. Do you still have your two poodles?
I do, but you know what? When you were saying that, we lost the oldest poodle. We lost from that bio. We got another dog because we're dog people, and the dog that we got, we adopted, and they from the family the place that we got them, they give their proceeds to adoption, which is a part of my family's story and all that. Anyway, he's mixed between a poodle and a Saint Bernard. So he's this massive 145, 50-pound, dopey, cute, loving dog. Yeah. So I do have two poodles technically. It's a different one, but man, they're a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun.
That's great. Well, I stopped my sentence short at the names Axel and Rowdy, and so I guess
Yeah.
I'm glad I did that because one of them would
Yeah.
have been the one that's already passed. I'm glad you
Yeah.
got a new one.
Yeah. We're dog people for sure.
I love that. Yeah, you
Yeah.
got a sense of that from your old bio. Like you talked a lot about your dogs.
They're sweet. Yeah, they're fun. They're fun
That's
dogs. We
awesome.
grew up with them, all the things.
That's awesome. We decided that if my wife were to have a podcast, it would be just like, tell me about your dog. And she would just
Yeah.
pull somebody on and have them talk about their dogs for an hour. And she'd be perfectly happy with that.
Yep. Yeah. I get it. I get it. They're a lot of fun dogs.
That's awesome. The other change I needed to make in your introduction was a move. So you moved from St. Pete, Florida, over to Gilbert, Arizona. I
Yeah.
heard you recently on a podcast talk to Dr. Brian Lenskis and say that you really loved Arizona. I
do.
think that was recorded before the summertime. So I was going to give you an opportunity to revise your statement after having survived a summer in Arizona. It sounds like you're still in love with the place.
Yeah, we do. We really like it. And we moved here so I could go back to school to become a naturopath, like a naturopathic doctor. And so I just finished my first year. Our is technically our second summer. We kind of moved halfway through the summer last year, so we didn't get the worst of it. But compared to the humidity in Florida, Arizona's summers are not the worst. The humidity will really take it out of you in Florida, and I can't say that about Arizona. Yes, it gets 120 degrees, but there's something to be said about dry heat that is just fantastic.
Totally. Yeah, we don't get as hot up here in Salt Lake. It's usually about 15 to 20 degrees cooler than it is down there. We've had some really hot days, especially last summer. And yeah, you're right. The dry heat, it's like, yes, it's very hot, but you're not like pouring sweat out of the back of
No,
your knees or whatever.
no,
East Coast
it's
is
not.
legit.
Yeah, yeah.
Totally legit. Well, let's dive into your story. Eventually, you want to end up to the point of you deciding to move and doing the naturopathic doctor course. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Curious to hear like what will be different about you and your career than it is now. We'll get there eventually, but first, tell us about your history and your involvement with sports and athletics. It sounds like you've been interested in that for a very long time.
Yeah, so I grew up in South Mississippi. I grew up out in the country. I grew up, I had the best childhood ever. My grandfather took me hunting and fishing. I grew up kind of country girl in the land, and I loved it. It was fantastic. Very limited screen time, no social media, none of that stuff, no TVs. Which I was really blessed with. I grew up with a boy cousin, and I think that that's what kind of made me into like an athlete. I just grew up around a lot of boys playing sports my whole life. And so I had this passion and I had this desire to continue that on in college. And so I had a lot of fun. And I did grow up, I will say this, a little bit on the heavier side. So like rewind a little bit. I was adopted as a child. I was not breastfed. I don't really know a lot of my prenatal history. So, and that will come into play in a second. So I was a heavier kid growing up. Anything about the South, we all know the food in the South is very indulgent, very good, high fat, high sugar. My parents did great. They did the best they could with the information they had, but I wouldn't have said it was a quote unquote healthy diet. So anyway, I went into college, a good athlete, but definitely on the heavier side. And I just knew I started to know something was kind of amiss my junior year of college. I'd never really had any issues kind of like playing or anything, but I started first noticing issues with my cycle. So that was kind of the first red flag that I had was, okay, like my cycle started to skip. I started to have like some of the hormonal symptoms that women start to express, and cystic acne, some of my hair was falling out. Like it was just, I started not to feel good. I started to get really oily skin. Just things were like, ugh, I just wasn't feeling like top notch. I was still playing fine. And I think probably the athleticism like had tamped or like kept this down and masked a lot of these symptoms for years and years and years. But I was still probably 30, 45 pounds overweight. And so I went to the nurse on campus and I said, the nurse practitioner, I said, hey, something's up. Like my cycle's gone. Like, I don't know what's going on. And, the typical thing at that time was, well, it's just because you're an athlete, like you're running a lot, you play all these games, you lift weights, you probably just need some birth control, then we can kind of figure it out. So they put me on birth control. That was the first line of defense against this. And no other things. They didn't even take labs, which I look back now and I'm like, holy moly, no labs were even pulled at that time, my junior year. So I got on birth control. That didn't really kind of mask some things for a couple years, didn't really do anything much for me overall. Definitely didn't lose weight. If anything, gained some. I did notice though, I did have started to pique my interest in nutrition because I did notice when I started eating a little bit better, I noticed, okay, I feel a little better. The acne will stay away. Like I feel a little sharper. I play a little bit better. And that's originally what got me interested into dietetics and nutrition. And I had no idea that dietetics was clinical. I had no idea I'd end up working in chronic disease. I just knew it affected my performance. And so I started studying to be a dietitian, and kind of fast forward a bit, I got my residency at a hospital down in Florida at VA Bay Pines. I'm still having all these hormonal issues. They're progressively getting worse. They got way, way worse after my senior year of college. Once I stopped athletics, I was still I was still trying to keep up with workouts, but it was nowhere near these 2-a-days, these 90-minute games. It was more or less just a 30-minute run here and there, maybe a 15, 20-minute weightlifting cycle. So you can imagine whatever symptoms I was masking with the excessive exercise have now kind of come on full force. And so I'm working as a brand new dietitian at this hospital, and these symptoms just hit me like a brick wall. I gained probably 25 pounds within a couple months of my first year as a dietitian. and I'm getting progressively more brain fog, more sluggish. I'm getting worse acne. I look back at pictures and my face was just so inflamed and I was so puffy and I was having to take naps. I can remember like feeling like I needed a nap every day around lunch, just horrific. It was just a struggle. Every day was a struggle for me to just feel good. I was newly married pretty soon thereafter. And I would just felt really awful. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out like, why is this happening? I'm a dietitian. I'm following at this point, I'd made pretty significant changes in my diet. Like I was pretty well following the dietitian recommendations of like eating whole grains, a lot of beans, a lot of like the things. And I'm still like getting worse and gaining more and more weight. And so get married and I go see an OBGYN because I know at this point, like would really like to start thinking about children, but I'm still having like no cycle and I'm on birth control, but I want off and all these things. And the OBGYN like immediately goes, oh, well, you have PCOS. Like I don't even need to take blood work. They did and eventually confirmed it, and said you have PCOS. We need to check your thyroid, do all these things. And said you need to be on metformin and spironolactone and kind of the typical PCOS treatment. And I was very frustrated. And I was like, well, how did this get missed? Like nobody has told me this. I was really frustrated because I straight up asked him like, well, what can I do besides pharmaceuticals? There's nothing. Like you're going to need fertility treatments, the whole 9 yards. And I remember walking out of that was a pivotal day in my life because I remember walking out of that OBGYN doctor's office and thinking, okay, like challenge accepted. I'm not going to let this beat me. This has taken 4 years of my life at this point. I'm sick of being sick and tired. I'm sick of this weight. I'm sick of the way I feel. I'm sick of not having any energy to like go do adventures or I feel good. And I'm done. And that's when I really started diving headfirst into alternative therapies for treatments.
Wow. Can I ask you a quick question? As you're going through all of that, you mentioned you're getting trained, you're a dietitian. Did you still have any inkling of a thought that like diet is contributing to this? Or in your mind, were you like, oh, I'm already doing the perfect diet. This must be something else. This is genetics or something.
Yeah, I did think the whole time. So I would consider myself a little bit of a questioner just in general of rules in general. And I did think the whole time something's not right. I'm eating exactly the way I learned to eat as a dietitian. Why is this not helping? There's something off. Why am I not losing weight? I'm following exactly what I have been taught to teach people. I'm quote unquote supposed to be the professional in this, right? Like I'm supposed to be the food and nutrition professional on weight loss. Why am I doing exactly what I've been taught to teach others? Like this is supposed to be my career. Why can't I get this weight off? And so, yes, the whole time I had it was almost this like a bit of a sinking feeling or like a gut feeling. It wasn't a good feeling. Whatever it wasn't a good feeling. I felt like an imposter. I'll say that much. I felt a little bit like it was a little bit of shame. It was a little bit of like frustration, kind of all the things mixed in of like, why can't I figure this out? I was also really young. Like I was like a 22, 21 at the time. And didn't know a lot, hadn't had a lot of experience. And so, yeah, I the whole time I had a lot of questions and I was really, I was searching for sure.
Wow. You used the word shame. That's what kind of I was thinking in the back of my mind. And yeah, not the same experience, but similar. You're a personal trainer, like myself, and I'm a nutrition coach. And I've done this for a long time. You're giving people the advice and telling them exactly what to do, and they're repeatedly failing and failing and failing. But you feel good kind of about yourself because, like, well, I told them what to do, and they just simply can't do it. It's a whole different thing if you're watching your own health kind of deteriorate, and you're doing all the things.
Yeah, it was. And it was especially frustrating because I was really feeling like conventional medicine, especially after the appointment with the OBGYN. I was really frustrated with the lack of options as well. I was like, well, this can't be it. Like this is all you're a board certified OB. Like that's all you have for me is metformin, like or spironolactone. Like this can't be the only solution. But you're absolutely right. And it's like one of those things where you're sitting there and you're talking to someone who's obese and struggling with their weight, but you're also struggling with your weight. And so like they're crying, but you also want to cry. So it's like this, it's a very interesting dynamic. And I think I'm very glad for it though. I'll say that much, because I believe that that time of my life, without that time of my life, I would not be where I am now. I believe that that part of my testimony is 100% why I like have the experience to do what I'm doing now. But yeah, it wasn't an easy couple years for sure.
Did you ever think about doing something different for your career? Did you ever think like this just is not for me? Like, did that cross your mind?
I did. And a lot of dietitians do kind of like random things. Like some will go into research, or some will go work for like food corporations and do like meal plans, or work for restaurants and do, I really considered, I didn't even know dietitians worked in chronic disease. And I believe in a higher power to a great deal. And I didn't even know dietitians worked in chronic disease when I started to get into it. I was just an ignorant kind of like jock college player who was like, oh, well, I like sports. I like sports, and food makes me feel good. So I'll like study this. You know, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But again, I really feel like I was pushed in this direction because of this experience. And then knowing now what I know, it's like, oh yeah, this was totally the whole will for my life. But yeah, I did. I thought several times like I could totally use this degree and take it and go work for whoever and make meal plans or something, or go work in a nursing home and just do the menu planning or something. Yeah, it was I had many of those days where I was like,
Yeah.
this is just not right. Because you feel like a full-on imposter.
Yeah, totally. We've already mentioned Dr. Lenskis, but also like Dr. Tro. They mentioned being doctors, very, very overweight and obese.
Yep.
They're trying to get their people to do the right things. What can they say at that point? Like that they can't really do anything helpful because they're struggling with it themselves. They're trying to follow the advice and it's not working, and so frustrating. And I
Yeah.
love looking back on our lives and seeing those bottom moments that lead us to where we're supposed to go. And I think it's really cool that you recognize it as that. I
Yeah.
think it really could have gone either way. Like that it went this certain way for you. I think you're right. It must be something divine, because you could have just as easily gotten lost in other rabbit holes and gotten really like worse information. But
Yeah.
what happened? What changed? How did you end up getting the good information?
Yeah, yeah. This is a great question. And I tell this to my clients all the time, don't give up, because there is so much information out there that it can be very overwhelming when you're first kind of getting like, you're trying to gather your thoughts, like, okay, what's my next step? What do I need to do next? Like, what's going to work for me? But I said that day, and leaving the OB was a very pivotal day for me. I decided that day that like, okay, like challenge accepted, like I'm not gonna, metformin and spironolactone isn't going to be what heals this for me. And sure enough, it doesn't for 99.99% of the people. But I started, I will say this, the metformin prescription got my wheels turning. So he prescribed me metformin, and I thought in my head, I was like, okay, wait a second. You're giving me a diabetes medication to control PCOS and spironolactone. So I started to look into the actual functions and like what these medications act on, how they work, what they do, how they move glucose, how they act in the liver, etc. And so that is what got my wheels turning. And so I was like, okay, he's giving me these medications, birth control, whatever, that just is kind of a band-aid. But and I started thinking, oh shoot, like this is a glucose insulin issue. Like what, like, oh, like I get it now. And so that is what sparked my curiosity about a PCOS essentially being diabetes of the ovaries. And so that is what initially got me into, okay, like now I kind of have this idea in my head sparked from this metformin prescription. And then that's when I got onto Google, honestly. And the first couple things that popped up for me, the first thing that I got my hands on was the Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung. The second thing I got my hands on, and I couldn't read that book fast enough. I think I finished that book in a day and a half. I kid you not. I got it on Amazon and I finished it so quickly. And I was giving them away. I was buying them and giving them away to doctors that I was working with at the VA, because I was so like, wait, why does everyone not know this? Why is every dietitian not have to read this book? Then the second book I got my hand on that I promise you, I think I've bought over 20 of his books, is Dr. Bickman's. Yep. Yeah. I know. He probably thinks I'm crazy because I talk about him on every podcast. And no, I don't think he thinks that. But I give that book away so frequently because I think every medical or potential medical professional should read that book, because I didn't get one second of education on insulin resistance. Yes, I know all the pathways. Yes, I memorized the Krebs cycle. Yes, I could recite to you every single all the things from learning that in as a dietitian, but nobody had ever put all the things together for me like he had in that book. And that was the second book that I read, and that is when the light bulb went on for me, and I was then like a vacuum to all this information that I could not stop. And I then got onto the Verta Health website, and then I couldn't stop. I was ordering book after book after book and YouTubing and podcasting, and I couldn't turn it off. And immediately started, of course. So like within a few days, I had cut 90% of the carbs out of my life. And I wasn't even eating that. I mean, I was eating beans and legumes and whole grains and quinoa and couscous and all the healthy dietitian-y things that I thought were doing me a favor, and juicing. Oh my gosh, all the things that like you think are like, oh, cleansing and doing all these things that were actually just like wrecking my blood glucose and wrecking my insulin and just absolutely destroying my hormones. And so within like 3 or 4 days, I had just absolutely basically broken it down to like steak, chicken, fish, eggs, and non-starchy vegetables and olive oil. And I wouldn't even really eaten a ton of nuts. I mean, I think nuts are fine. They just weren't super helpful for me at the time, but I had broken it down to that. And within like 2 or 3 weeks, I had lost like 13, 14 pounds. Like just absolutely, the cystic acne I didn't even have an issue with that. I think I took metformin for maybe a week, and I was like, this is terrible. I don't feel well on this. This is screwing my stomach up. Like, this is just awful. And so, after just over consuming just about every like low carb, ketogenic, metabolic health podcast, resource, book I could get my hand, Good Calories, Bad Calories by Gary Taubes, Vinnie Torture. I could go on all of their books. I was just reading everything I could get my hands on. I started to immediately feel better within a couple weeks, and I was like, okay, I'm on to something. And then that turned into like 2, 3 months. I'd lost like 30 pounds, and my cycle returned in like 2 months, full on normal ovulation cycle, no help, no birth control, got off birth control, like no problem, all the things. And, I was just like, it was that easy. Like I'd struggled for years, and all I needed was just a little bit of information.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, Jason Fung was instrumental in my understanding. I've been using metabolic carts for over a decade to measure metabolism. The
Yeah.
listener will be sick of this story. I've told this story probably 100 times, but
Yeah.
people would come in doing intermittent fasting, and I would think like, okay, well, you're not eating very many calories. You just told me what you eat, and it's not very many calories. Your metabolic rate is going to be low. Run a test, and their metabolic rate is way higher than it should have been, even at like a normal level. These people turned into these crazy fat burners. They were just
Yeah.
chewing through fat like crazy, and they feel amazing. And that's how I found all this entire world to begin with. And I have to say, Ben Bickman, and what an amazing guy he is. He goes to the wrong school. It's 30 minutes down the road from here at BYU, but that's okay. We'll forgive him for that. I've got about 10 minutes left to go in the episode that you did with him on your podcast.
Yeah.
I have to just take a quick diversion and ask, what was it like to be able to
Yeah.
have him on your show and ask him questions and communicate with the man who literally changed your understanding of all of this?
Yeah, well, I'll say this about Dr. Bickman. I talk about him on just about every podcast that I'm featured on. One, he's the nicest person that I've really truly met in this space. Like, he's genuinely as nice as you would expect him to be. I think he portrays that he's very kind over social media, but he is genuinely just as kind off air that he is on air, I guess you could say. But he is extremely smart, and you almost feel like he's extremely smart, and but also extremely humble. And yeah, it's a real honor for me. And I have the privilege of writing some of the blogs for Health Code, which is the protein powder company that he that he and his brother Joel have founded. And yeah, they're both, he's just an incredibly kind and genuine person. And I think one of the most respectable people, not just in like academically speaking, in terms of like, obviously he's a complete brainiac and is well above most of us in IQ. But he really truly is one of the kindest people that I've interacted with in this low carb
Amazing.
space. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I would submit that even if you didn't know anything about the topics that we're talking about, if you listen to him talk and then listen to maybe somebody like a vegan doctor or something, if you had no knowledge of the space, I believe you would still be able to tell that one person is speaking very carefully, very deliberately. They're saying what they know, what they don't know, where the other side is more just kind of like emotion, and we think that, and everybody knows that, and experts
Yes.
agree that. You know what I mean? Like there's a big difference in hearing those two types of people talk.
Yes, and he always is very, what I really like about him too, and I really respect this, is that he is very, he's always, and I think we should all take note of this and really judge who we listen to in these types of settings on this note, is he's always very careful about saying like, this was a in vivo study or a rat study, or here's another study that showed this, that kind of contradict. He's very like open, like he's very, it's not like his way or the highway. And you can very well tell that even when he talks about studies that like he's done or whatever. Yeah, he's very like, I don't know if you listen to one of he's done like a debate kind of with oh man, it's the one of the like calories in, calories out guys. I don't know, but yes, it's he's, I would agree with you. He's very careful about what he says, and he's very like, science should always be questioned, which I really admire out of that. And it's very like, I hope we find out more, and we've got to find out more and keep going and going and going, and it's not definitive and all that. It's so yes, I would 100% back that up. What with what you said, he's
That's
very
amazing.
cautious. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I didn't know he did a debate with anybody. Was it, for example, was it like Lane Norton? If you
No, no,
recall,
no, it wasn't. Although that would be, I would definitely
that would be epic.
pay money to see that. No, it was with I think it was with it's not Sapien. I'll have to look it up and send it to you. I don't know that you would consider it a debate, but it was like
Got
back
it.
and forth about calories in versus calories out, and like the different but it was like him and I think two other guys on food, maybe it was the Food Lies guy
Okay.
podcast. I don't know. I'll
Brian
look
Sanders.
for it. Yeah, I'll look for it and let you know.
Cool.
But it was a great podcast and he made great points and it was just very well done.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, going back to your story, this is kind of putting you at a bit of an awkward kind of period in your life, because you're
Yeah.
still training to be a registered dietitian
Yeah.
and you're learning essentially kind of the opposite of what you are being taught. What is that like?
Yeah. Well, you know what? So when I had started implementing this, I was actually about 9 months in, I think, as a full RD. I had passed my RD exam. I had gotten hired at the hospital that I was an intern at. And I was actually working in like mostly diabetes and metabolic disease. Like I did home-based primary care, but it also covered a ton in the diabetes clinic and anybody that was like absent in the actual hospital setting. So like, inpatient, all that outpatient. I did a lot of outpatient clinic, which is mostly diabetes, hypertension management, etc. And so, yes, it was a bit of a like young life crisis. And I was having a very hard time, not just word vomiting everything that I knew on everyone and saying like, you need to like stop eating carbs, like if you want off all this medication, like do this, like read this book. And because I was brand new and I was like the young one on the totem pole, and like I had just started and all these doctors and endocrinologists had been there for 25 years, and who am I to question anything and all this other stuff. But you know what? I started to counsel veterans anyway. And you know what really helps me is Virta Health, which is, have you heard of Virta Health?
Yeah, absolutely. They're amazing.
VIRTA. So they did a study at the hospital. They did a study with veterans. It wasn't necessarily localized to the hospital I was at, but I was able to enroll veterans that I was working with in the Virta Health study. And I enrolled several veterans of my caseload into this study. It
Wow.
was all on ketosis. They were letting them in for free, which Virta Health is pretty expensive. It's not expensive, but if insurance doesn't cover it, whatever. Anyway, they were letting veterans in for free and they were doing a study on them. I had a couple of like kind of my favorites and I enrolled them in this study and the results were, I mean, shocking doesn't even do it justice. Like one guy got completely off all insulin and got down to like the lowest dose metformin. He lost like 96 pounds, something just like crazy in like less than a year. And so I had all these like stories of these guys that I had enrolled with Virta Health and they were putting on my ketogenic diet. And this doctor from this outpatient clinic that I was kind of working hand in hand with, very open-minded doctor, very like not stuck in her ways. She was like, whoa, like there's something to this. And I'm thinking, yeah, like I already knew there was, but I'm glad that you see it as well. And I'm thankful that Virta Health gave us that opportunity. And so that was really pivotal. In that moment, I said, you know what? There's like proof in the pudding. I'm just going to start doing low carb keto with these guys. And so I was teaching, they had these things called move classes, which this is 4 years out. I don't know if they still do this, but I was teaching these classes, like a 16-week long weight loss class essentially. And I like changed all the curriculum to low carb and like I was switching things. I mean, I probably would have gotten in a lot of trouble. I mean, I did get kind of reprimanded on some things, but I didn't really care because I knew what worked. And so, yeah, I just started switching things and people were seeing the results. I mean, people were other endocrinologists at different outpatient clinics were sending me their clients from like, I worked in St. Pete. I was getting clients from across town. They were coming from different clinics that they should go to closer clinics to my clinic. Like it was getting crazy. And like the diabetes clinic, people were dropping their A1Cs. One of the nurses in the diabetes clinic, like worked with me. Like it was just this crazy like turn of events. And I started to get some confidence, you know, here I am like at the time 22 and 23 maybe. And I was just, it was just crazy. And I was the results speak for themselves. Like they truly do, you know, people were losing weight, getting off all these medications. And, you know, I was having conversations I still talk to some of these veterans, you know, 10 years later, you know, and so it was just amazing. It was truly amazing.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's such a relatable experience. Once you find this world, you get totally obsessed with it, and then you start to see all the results that you're getting for people, and it's totally addictive. So it sounds like the reception to some of your things, you got pushback, but it wasn't so aggressive. Like, would you say the result was kind of like more neutral?
I would say I would say I got more pushback from other dietitians than I did from physicians, although yeah, I wouldn't say neutral. It was a little bit more hostile than I would say neutral. I got a little bit of pushback. A lot of dietitians were very anti low carb, anti keto. I was getting more pushback from my actual colleagues than I was like upper management than anything. It was other dietitians that were very not cool with it, which is fine. Like we all know the science behind it now, especially even then we knew. And so but it was fine. And I didn't really care because my patients were the ones that were losing 60 pounds and their patients weren't. And their patients were coming, you know, and so it was like, and there was like one or two in particular. It wasn't all of them. I worked with some phenomenal dietitians and some of them I still talk to today. I'm friends with today. There was just a couple that were like, oh, I don't really like this. You're kind of pushing the boundaries. You're not preaching what the dietitians were taught to preach. And we don't like that. But I've always been a little bit on that, again, a rule pusher. And again, I'm not one to spout something over and over again if it's not working. And the Virta Health study, like, I mean, you've seen it. You can go look, everyone can go look it up on VA veterans. Like the results speak for themselves again. We weren't getting results as dietitians like the Virta Health was. And so why would I continue preaching the same nonsense when Virta Health was dropping people's A1Cs by like 7 points? You know, so it's like, I'm just not the one to like, I want the best for my clients. And so I'm willing to take the pushback if it means that my clients are going to get off insulin and stop gaining weight. And so I was willing to take that. Now, I will say ultimately it did lead to me quitting the VA. Like I was just tired of the governmental bureaucracy and red tape. I love the veterans. I come from a family background of military and all of it. And I would gladly serve veterans any day, every day. Again, I just would never work at a conventional medical system again.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that also kind of answers the question of why you're doing additional training today so that you can practice in the way that you like. I think this would be a nice time to take a quick diversion and maybe explain what it is about what Verta was doing, what you were discovering, what is it about low carbohydrate nutrition, ketogenic nutrition. If somebody's listening and they're like, yeah, I saw keto on a magazine cover at the grocery store, but that just looks like a lot of bacon, like, and they kind of get like confused about what it is. Can you explain what ketosis is and why it's beneficial for chronic disease in this magnitude?
Yeah, so great question because this gets really convoluted. A lot of people think keto is a fad diet when it unfortunately does take on that definition now because of social media and media has made it that, but in reality, ketosis is just a metabolic process. And so keto in the hands of the wrong people looks like a lot of bacon, butter, very high processed fat, even to some degree processed food, when in reality, ketosis is just a different way to metabolize and make energy. And so when we're talking about chronic disease and we're talking about metabolic health, getting someone getting someone's metabolism, their ability to burn ketones as energy is very, very effective and very, very useful when it comes to helping them lower their risk of chronic disease, lower their weight, lower their A1C, lower inflammation, protect their cognitive function, et cetera, so on and so forth. Essentially, we're switching them from using glucose as fuel to using ketones as fuel. And ketones can be made in the liver from dietary fat and or body fat. Now, a lot of myths and things come along from keto. A lot of times people think, oh, well, if I go keto, I'll never eat carbs again. Not true. You just have to eat them strategically and you have to eat the right ones. And you just have to get to a place where your body can handle them correctly. A lot of people with chronic disease have just gotten to a place where they just don't tolerate carbohydrates well. It's not even that they can never eat them again. They're just eating too much of them too frequently, eating too often, and eating too high fat alongside the carbohydrates. And so when we remove one or the other, and in my way, and people that use low carb and keto, we take away carbs and to some degree, sometimes take away fat if we're taking away processed food, and we do high protein. I teach a relatively high protein keto. So I would say it's moderate to high protein and moderate fat, and then obviously very low carb. But essentially, to answer your question, what we're doing is we're switching their metabolic process to teach their body how to use its own fat, its own stored fat for fuel again. And that is just a process we have not tapped into by our environmental food standards and the way that our environment is set up nowadays. It's just we eat too frequently, too often, too indulgent, etc.
Yeah. Ketosis is so important that it warrants one entire sentence in my 600-page nutrition manual behind me. One sentence that says anything about ketosis, that's it. One sentence. And you're
Yeah.
describing an entire process that optimizes so many different things. It's absolutely amazing all the things that it can treat and it can deal with, as Ben excellently puts forth in his book. Like we see all these different diseases, really they're just branches of the same tree.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of people think like, and unfortunately, like this is the way that social media and media has made it out to be is like, again, they think, oh, fad diet, like I'm only going to eat this way for the rest of my life. In reality, it's just another tool in the toolbox to use to get you to a place that you want to be. The same way that any dietary pattern ever would be, you just need to essentially help your body like improve its metabolic function. And that's what we do when we take away carbohydrates and get you quote unquote in ketosis. And so yeah, there's a lot of myths, there's a lot of things around it, but nearly every chronic disease, like you said, Dr. Bickman described so well, and why we get sick is it has either roots in it or is directly stemmed from insulin resistance. It's like gas to a flame, and so it truly is. Once you can take that factor out, your health, your mental clarity, the way you feel, your hormones. I mean, the list goes on and on. And we're only continually, I say he and all the other researchers who are looking at this stuff are continuing to figure out more and more things are coming from it, essentially.
Yeah, I love that. I like also how you landed on a higher protein version for most people. And I think this is where people need to be a little bit more mindful and really sit down and think about what am I seeking from this particular life and lifestyle? Because for most of us, I would say our main goal is not to just drive up ketones to be as high as possible. In
No.
that situation, you would want to kind of limit your proteins a little bit, because they can, suppress ketones a little bit. And so if you have bipolar, or you're very diabetic and you need to be more strict, that might be something. Cancer treatments, if you're doing that, that might be a reason why. But for most of us, we want to have good energy, we want to have good muscle mass. Higher protein seems a lot more necessary in that situation.
A lot more necessary and a lot more realistic long term. So I tend to only do the higher fat stuff with those very same situations that you mentioned, very life threatening cancer treatments, neurodegenerative diseases, epilepsy, things that are very serious and that we need to triage correctly, and that we need to not fix quickly, but like we're talking, we've got a triage, right? We've got life or death and or very serious matters on our hands. And so the higher protein stuff is absolutely correct. Is more functional. It's easier to do long term. You feel full longer. You run into less issues side effects wise, so on and so forth. But yeah, I'm a big fan of higher protein keto. I'm not worried about driving those ketones up into the twos, even the threes. We don't need it that high to see fantastic results. And so, yeah, I concur. It's a great point.
Yeah, when you make such a good point talking about the state of ketosis, and while I think most of us are noticing a little bit of a downward trend in the word keto and keto things that are popping up,
I know.
what you're describing is always useful. That's always useful. You should never want to be too far out of a state of ketosis. You'd want
Yeah.
to kind of build your base at least somewhere near that kind of lifestyle.
100%. And a sign of a healthy metabolism, like even if you're not following a ketogenic lifestyle to some degree, most people that are metabolically healthy should be waking up with some level of ketones in their blood. If you're a generally active adult, you should be having some degree of ketones in your blood in the morning. Like it just should be, like if you're metabolically healthy, even if you're not necessarily restricting carbohydrates extremely low. And so yeah, I would agree. Like it just is, it doesn't have to be, people have just developed this very restrictive kind of put keto in a box and a bubble mindset. And again, media, social media, the whole nine yards. But yes, it is a sign of a optimally functioning metabolic system.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the way you explained carbohydrates earlier, I thought was very interesting because you didn't say that they were bad. It's just that we're eating
No.
them too many times, or not seasonally anymore. So an exercise I'll give to some of my clients is like, okay, I'm taking away all the restaurants and grocery stores, and you go outside right now and try to live. And first of all, like it's shocking how few plants you could even eat if you wanted to. Most of them have no, nutrition value for a human. And
Yeah.
secondly, like here, we're end of summer at the time of recording here in Salt Lake City. I know of 4 fruit trees around and they're ripe. So yes, you could go to those trees and you could eat as much fruit as you like. You're competing with other animals, and you only get them for like a week or two, but you could have as many as you like. And that's fine, because there's going to be a few weeks from now, unfortunately, that the snow is going to fly around here, and those are going to go away. And so I think thinking about it in that way, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense. If I'm eating carbohydrates all day, every day for 40 years, that's going to be a problem.
100%. And yes, like those very same patterns that you're describing are what has led people to become insulin resistant and metabolically unhealthy, is the constant carbs. And it all comes down to the ease of access to foods, right? Nobody has a problem just driving down the street. We go to the grocery store and we can get as much fruit as we want, but not only fruit, like bags of chips, cartons of ice cream, cake, candy, whatever we want is at access all the times. And most of us, if we're being honest, probably have some of that in our house. And so it just develops. It's just, we have become so far removed from natural tendencies and natural patterns of eating and whole food eating and all of that, that has become the root cause of all of this. And when you boil it back down to getting enough protein, even down to fiber and filling up on vegetables and things like that, it really solves a lot of those issues.
Yeah, totally. I was just thinking as we were talking about apples, I was like, if only it were just apples. It's all the stuff in the middle that's so deliciously tempting that is the real problem.
I know. And one thing too that I was thinking of is you'll find that once people heal at least with my clients and myself too, like just from wearing CGMs and biohacking and looking at these things, like when you followed low carb and you've healed your metabolism, like I can go and eat a significant amount of watermelon and or do something like that, have fruit, or even like have something that maybe like an almond flour cupcake or something, and have a pretty significant blood glucose spike, but be in ketosis the next day. And so, and I've seen that with some of my clients, as a lot of my clients as well, is like once you kind of take care of the base. Now, I'm not saying you should do this all the time by any means. I'm not saying this is a good strategy to employ, but I'm saying it does give you a lot of food freedom, because a lot of people say, oh, that's so restrictive. But no, once you've actually healed your body and you've done the work on the front end and you've created lean muscle mass and you're moving all the time and you're doing all these things, like those things that you've worried about in the past are really not that much of an issue. Again, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And that doesn't trigger further cravings for you.
It can. I mean, I'm very cautious about that kind of stuff. I have red light and green light foods. I kind of talk about that with my clients. Like
Yeah.
there's some things I will not bring in the house. Same thing with like my husband and my kid. Like there's just things that if we're going to have it, we're going to have it out in a controlled setting, and where it's like, okay, once it's done, it's done. We're not going to go out of our way, but we don't bring anything in the house. Like we don't have any sweets in our house. We don't have any ice cream, cake, candy, anything. Cause we still have littles. If we do have something, like it's kind of an event, and we'll make like homemade chocolate chip cookies with almond flour and stevia, and my kids will help make it. And it's a 2-hour thing. And like, by the time you end up making the dang things, like nobody's even like, it's just like, they eat one or two and then they're off outside playing again. So it's just like not it's like a treat and a fun thing, but we just try not to be too restrictive, but also like enjoy things here and there. We're about to go on vacation. We're about to go to Disney World literally on Saturday. And so like, yeah, I'll probably have a bite or two of something. And then, another thing we do is we'll split something as a family. So like if we get a dessert, or like it's a kid's birthday or something, and we'll get like a small piece of cake, we'll get a small piece of cake for all four of us,
Yeah.
and so everyone ends up with like 2 bites of something. So it's
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah. Very different than crushing an entire sleeve of Oreos every afternoon. I think that
yeah,
that makes it fun. The kids will remember it. And again, you know what you're dealing with in yourself. Very different to somebody like me or somebody like Ben Bickman, who described on your podcast. Like if he has cold cereal, he can't stop himself. And
yeah,
I pushed back on him on this one when we hosted him on our show. He said that Frosted Mini Wheats is like his favorite cereal. And I told him, like, objectively, scientifically, absolutely not. There's so many better cereals
I
than
would
Frosted
agree.
Mini Wheats. Come on.
Yeah, and I would say that there are some foods like, and it totally depends. Like if you would have asked me that question 6 years ago, the answer would have been completely different. Like I would have not been able to just sit and split one cake with my family 6 years ago. That would have not happened. I would have been upset that I wasn't getting my own. Like my hormones would have wanted more. Like I really, when I was dealing with a PCOS and binge eating go hand in hand, for the record, for anyone who doesn't, I mean, the hormones. And a lot of people think that that's like a discipline issue. No, that is a full-blown hormonal. Some of it may be like emotional, psychological stuff, but your hormones take over with PCOS, any insulin resistance, anything like that. It is so powerful. You will never win against your hormones. I tell my clients that all the time. Like discipline is one thing, like yes, but you have got to set up protective barriers for yourself, because hormones will win almost
Oh
all
yeah.
the time unless you have put in. That's why I say keep the crap out of your house. Like don't make it hard. Like you're not going to get up at midnight. Some people might, and drive to Walmart or something like that to get food, but so I say that with caution, because it all depends on the stage of like where you are, and knowing your health, and knowing like what food is what, because I can't do that with all foods. And I would agree, cold cereal, there's something real special about cold cereal, because it will wreck you.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah.
No, I totally agree with the hormones. It's interesting to think too that, like, when I go to a Brazilian steakhouse, I think I'm going to put these guys out of business. Different hormones, but they are hormones that tell you have to stop after 45 minutes. I literally can't chew food anymore. It's crazy how powerful they are on both sides.
On both sides. And that is one of the principal foundations that I teach in my course, is like, we don't need to worry about restriction so much. Is if we focus so much on what you can have, how to heal your hormones first, then the kicking the sugar cravings and getting rid of the binge eating and all of that kind of comes naturally when you're, I mean, it's hard to binge eat when you've had a huge amount of protein. Like it's just not something that's easy to do. Now, I'm not saying there's some work that comes with that, but yes, like it works on both sides, but it takes some time, and a lot of grace comes with that, and patience as well, because it can be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, you've already mentioned PCOS lots of times. Understandable that that would be your area of specialty and what
Yeah.
you've pushed into, given your history. Low carbohydrate diets, ketogenic diets, and I would even throw carnivore diets. We see more
Yep.
women trying no carbohydrate carnivore diets. Are you concerned? Are you worried? Should women be cycling carbohydrates with their cycle? Like, what? Where do you sit as far as that goes?
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, the answer to this is I'm kind of 50-50. So, I'm all for carnivore in certain scenarios. So, I think carnivore can be really, really, really extremely helpful for autoimmunity, for things of that nature, for healing things. I am not certain or sure people are going to stay with it for the rest of their life. I just don't know. I just don't know, and I don't think we have the data on it. I think there are some of the anecdotal, like, oh, this is an 86-year-old, 96-year-old woman who's been carnivore, etc., so on and so forth. So I'm kind of in the wait and see camp of that group. But it is a subset of keto, and most carnivores are getting into ketosis most of the time. And so I like it for that manner. I do wonder about one thing I don't like about the carnivore thing is I'm not sure about the whole attack on vegetables. I don't necessarily know that they're as helpful as they've been made out to be. I also don't think they're as harmful as they're being made out to be right now. So I don't think that they have superpowers. I don't think that they're going to give you cancer and kill you either. So I kind of fall somewhere in the middle of that one as well. I know that there's some people that say, oh, well, there's this research, but I haven't really seen great research on the whole, like, I understand lecithins and oxalates and 100% plant paradox. I get all of that stuff for people that may be susceptible for that kind of stuff. But for the average healthy adult, I'm just not sure that having a avocado here and there, or olives, or a little bit of, cooked asparagus is going to be like the end of the world.
Very thoughtful answer. I really appreciate that, especially since I change my mind about this like every 3 minutes. You give me an answer that's 50-50. I can be right either way. That's amazing.
I know, right? Yeah.
It's
It's
great.
hard. It's hard. And it's so individualized, right? Because if you were someone that was having debilitating ulcerative colitis and you were emaciated and you were on your deathbed about to get a colectomy, go carnivore, no questions asked. I would have no hesitation. So it's very like, it really truly is such an individualized, like, process, and it would totally depend on the client and what they were struggling with. If I'm open, I'm fine with it. I've had many carnivore clients. I've done carnivore myself in periods, and so, like, I'm open to it. I'm just kind of like hesitant to say carnivore is the only way, the rest of the way, there's no other way for the end of time. I don't
Yeah.
fall in that camp either.
I love that. No, that's amazing. Sally Norton, I got to meet her in person earlier this year. We've interviewed her twice.
Yeah.
Obviously, author on oxalate and the harms of oxalate, and amazing content, like really amazing content. She's absolutely not wrong. Like I believe her. When I stop and think about it, I don't see that day to day. It's just those are not the people that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
You mentioned like the juicing. Like if you're doing what you and I were doing 10 years ago, and you're throwing spinach and beets and almond juice all in a blender every single morning, you might end up having an issue. But practically, I don't know that it's becoming like a huge issue for most people. Most people go keto however you like, and let's knock off 40 pounds and get you more insulin sensitive. That's going to be the bigger priority.
100%. And there's so many other things that we have to consider too. Like, and I've learned a lot of this just from being back in school, but like, are we looking at people's environmental pollution, or like environmental toxins? Like, have they been exposed to metals? Are they cleaning up their products? Are they rubbing phthalates all over them, and that's causing them insulin? Like, I mean, we could take this a million different directions, and there really are a lot of things out there that are harming us and that are not doing us any good. I'm just not 100%, like you said, sold that vegetables is like number one killer on the top.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do agree with Sally Norton's work to some degree. Like oxalates are a huge issue for a subset of people, and they certainly cannot tolerate them. I've worked with several people with IBD that are like, they can't, and you just have to know that about yourself and adjust accordingly.
Yep. Yeah. Adjust. That's a great way to say it. I mean, even Sally, she eats vegetables, just different kinds. She had a problem with oxalate, so she knows how to sub out the high ones for the lower ones.
Yeah.
And then we always have to remember that things like that are an accumulation. They don't accumulate greatly for everybody. So yeah, maybe we don't need to get too much into the minutia and just worry about, what the most important thing is. I love the saying, the goal is to keep the goal the goal. Let's focus on the most important priority.
Yeah, and the individual, right? And I say this because, like, you work with so many different people and in so many different stages of life and so many different backgrounds and customs and cultures and life stages. And like, what's realistic for you and your life and your family may be completely not even approachable for them in that moment. And really, like, as someone who works with people, we just have to meet them halfway. Like, what can we fix right now that's going to make the biggest difference in your life, and then what can we move on to next? And so a lot of my work is not even like, sometimes I'm not even switching somebody fully to keto. Like sometimes we're just like, I'm just trying to get them off soda. Like that may be the number one thing that like we got to fix right now, and then we can come and work on the bread and the pasta and the other things. And so like it's just all about like the individual and prioritizing like what they can handle, what they can manage, and taking their needs and all of their situation into consideration.
Totally. Very reasonable, really doable for everybody. And on that note, can you tell us how you are working with people? You mentioned your course.
Yeah.
How do you run your coaching these days, especially while you're in school? Like, are you slammed?
Full on. Yeah. I am slammed, but I love what I'm learning in school, and I love what I do with my clients. My clients are like I just love helping. I love working with the women that I work with. So I run a full on telemedicine private practice. So full-time registered dietitian. I use social media to get all of my clients. And essentially what I do is I help them navigate blood work. So we look through blood work and try to spot anything that may be holding them back from weight loss. And I help them come up with a protocol to treat that. Nothing super overcomplicated, nothing super expensive, nothing out of reach. And they work with me for a couple months, and I send them on their way, give them like I said, a protocol. And so, yeah, I have a program. I do, like I said, telemedicine, Zoom, chat message. I use an app that I have. It's called Practice Better, but it's a lot of fun. I feel really honored. And then I go to class when I'm not doing that. So it's good.
That's amazing. Do you have a clear vision of what your practice is going to be like once you graduate?
Yeah. So NDs, naturopathic doctors in the West, are basically primary care providers. So we can write all meds except like very high level painkillers like benzos, and then some ADHD medications we can't use, which is fine because I have no interest in any of that anyway. And so I want to have a brick and mortar. So I've done telemedicine for so long, but I truly miss like I see people face to face. I miss human interaction day to day.
It's
But
different.
yeah, it's different. But there are so many therapies that conventional medicine does not provide people that are incredibly helpful. I mean, peptides. I don't know if you're familiar, like CJC, ipamorelin, and BPC 157, all these different peptides and nutritional IVs. And, in a lot of the indies in Arizona will do, if people want to do like Botox and that's not necessarily my realm, but like you can provide all that as a naturopath. And so I want to work in obesity medicine with a brick and mortar somewhere in Arizona. I've thrown around Utah, I've thrown around New Mexico. I don't know where I'll land for sure. But yeah, I want a full brick and mortar. If it was up to me, I'll have multiple. So I'm excited. It'll be really great. I think people are running to natural medicine. There's just not enough of us to handle it. And so I think it's really, really good.
for what you do and how you help people, that seems like the perfect marriage between giving them, like you said, what people are flocking to, which is natural remedies and proper diet and education and that kind of thing, with also the ability to use medicine for what it can be very beneficial for. And yeah, if somebody needs a medicine temporarily, they need a pill, like yes, they need it. Like that's all very important.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I try to be really outspoken because I'm a fan of conventional medicine. Sometimes people think, "Oh, you know, you hate conventional." No, conventional medicine saved my daughter's life. Conventional medicine is life-saving. It is absolutely 100% necessary. Where conventional medicine falls short is prevention and chronic disease management.
Yeah.
And I think natural medicine really excels in that area. Where natural medicine falls short is heart attacks and things where people need life-saving conventional medicine. And I think the two can really bond and really be critical. I was on Dr. Linskit's podcast and talking to him about this. I think that like if you find my goal would be to find an MD like him or somebody similar that can help provide the conventional side and I could provide the natural side. And so yeah, I think it's kind of a match made in heaven if you find the right person. There's quite a battle between MDs and NDs that goes on in the you know, whatever world, medicine world, but I think it's ridiculous. And I think that the two can really provide such good when working together.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Temple, this has been an amazing hour. I can't believe an hour has already flown by.
Yeah.
This has been a super fun conversation. I think very educational. I think a lot of people will walk away from this conversation feeling more comfortable and confident with lifestyle practices that aren't necessarily being taught by the medical industry. So thank you so much for taking the time to stop by. Where do you want people to go to find you, to connect with you and your work?
Yeah, thank you. It was an honor. Thanks for having me on. Everyone can find me basically on every platform. I'm at the.ketogenic.nutritionist. Find me on Instagram, follow me there. I'm on YouTube, subscribe to my channel there. I'm on TikTok, go there. I'm on Twitter, go there. So whatever your listeners you know, like the most, they can find me on.
Okay, awesome. And that's the best place to like DM you?
Yeah, and I would say Instagram's the best place to DM me. I'm most active there in terms of answering. It's just a little easier to use. But yeah, they can DM me, ask me any questions, follow along. It's yeah, I really try to be responsive with my following. So yeah, send
That's
me.
great. And your awesome podcast, you're going to keep that going as well?
Yeah, I am. I am. I have one releasing today. I don't know if you know Danielle Hamilton. I have one with
She's
her
amazing.
coming out. She's awesome. I have a podcast with Laura Adler, who's an environmental toxin professional coming out. She's fantastic. We talked a lot about environmental toxins, phthalates, obesity, BPAs, a lot of stuff that really gets pushed aside when it comes to obesity and insulin resistance. I don't know if you know this. This is a random side note. Sorry, but I think Dr. Bickman's actually doing a study on pollution right now
Oh,
and
wow.
substance. Yeah, I'll have to ask. But anyway, yeah, podcasts, tons of stuff coming out.
Awesome. Those all sound very, very exciting. You do such a
Yeah.
good job on your show, and you've done such a good job here as our guest today. Thank you so very much for all of your work, everything that you've learned, and thank you for being willing to share your story and teach other people. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we really, really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. It was an honor to be on.
It was an honor to host you. And this has been another episode of Balanced Body Radio.